everyone, my name is Taryn and welcome to Tech Tuesday. We are at a new location here in the Peggy V. Helmerich Browsing Room. So this event is designed to encourage students to experiment with some of the latest software and devices. We want to make these tools accessible to all OSU students and provide opportunities for students to develop proficiency and comfort with the kinds of technology that you will need to be successful at OSU and beyond. This semester, Tech Tuesday at 2 will meet here in the browsing room on the first Tuesday of every month for interactive showcases of emerging and innovative technologies. Last year, we learned about new vlogging kits in the Edmond Lowe Creative Studios, animating in Adobe After Effects, and mixing audio in Adobe Audition. If you missed one of these programs, or if you just need a refresher, they're all available on OState TV, or they can be found on the library's website by searching for Tech Tuesday. Today's program is not just about one program, but it's about several. So it's going to look at how Adobe Creative Cloud can share files and work together to make a final product. Here to show off all of today's programs is the staff of Library Communication Services. So we'll take questions from the audience afterward, and if you're watching outside on today's live stream, you can submit questions on Twitter using the hashtag LibTech2s. At the end of our program, we will be drawing for prizes, including today's grand prize, a Wacom tablet, which is really cool. If you are an OSU student here with us, be sure to fill out a prize entry form. If you haven't already done that, one of us can help you out. Without further ado, we will begin with Communication Specialist Anthony Jones.
Hi everyone, like Taryn said, my name is Anthony Jones. I'm one of the communication specialists here at the OSU Library. We're going to look at a couple different of the Adobe programs and how they work together today. So while we were brainstorming about how we can do something that will incorporate everything, we started thinking about how it's spring semester and people are going to start looking towards graduation. So we decided what we're going to do today is we're going to design a graduation card announcement using the different programs to kind of take you through that process. And I'm going to start with Adobe Bridge. And Adobe Bridge works as a good photo management system, and you can do a lot of metadata through there. The first thing I want to do when I'm doing this is, for a graduation card, is I want photos for my card. So there's a couple different ways to pull stuff, but through Bridge, you can do File, and you can get photos from camera. You can do it there through your file. Or you can come through, there's this little desktop icon here, get photos from camera. Now I'm going to be pulling from a thumb drive, but it's the same function. So I'm going to do it, go ahead, and I'm going to say that it pulls up this dialog box. The first thing I want to do is I want to tell it where to go to, so I'm going to ask it to get from my thumb drive, and it pulls up all these photos. Now I want to pull all these photos for my project, so I'm going to leave them all selected. You can always unselect, you can select which ones you want to use. Then I want to tell it where to go. So I'm going to go over here to Browse, and we already have some file systems set up. We're going to be taking it into the Tech Tuesday Adobe-Palooza. I'm going to say select folder. I don't want a subfolder for this one. I'm just going to tell it none. But all of these photos have different names. So what I'm going to do is I want to do a rename file function through this. I'm going to give it a custom name. And like I said, we're working on a grad card, so I'm just going to call it grad card. And then it's going to give it a number, 1, 2, 3, 4 for each photo. I've got here, we're going to open it in Adobe Bridge. That way when we go through the photo downloader, they'll be there for Bridge. And there's a couple different functions there. We're not going to go to those because I'm going to show you how to do metadata here in a second. I'm just going to do get media. So it's now pulled those photos off of my thumb drive, and we are working in Bridge. So so as a photo management system, one of the important things we're going to look at is the metadata and keywords. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my photos, and I'm going to adjust some of that metadata and those keywords to make these a little bit more searchable as we go through. So I'm going to go File, File Info, and on my batch of photos, it opens up this dialog box, and all of the photos are selected right now. So we would be adjusting the metadata and the keywords for all of the files at once. I'm in the IPTC section of this, and that is really like the meat of the behind the scenes of your images you're using. There's creator, like the contact information for whoever the creator is, but I'm going to skip down to this content section, and I'm going to give it a couple keywords so it can help me find and search for the photos I'm looking for. For this one, I'm just going to go pretty basic. I'm going to say grad card, and I'm going to separate it with a semicolon, and I'm going to say library, and hit OK. So now I've put that keyword on all of these photos. I'm going to come to the right, and I'm going to tell it I want to search current folder in the search function, and I'm going to say grad card. So now we're only seeing the photos I want to use for this grad card. Well, because it's about me, it's going to be my graduation card, I want to select the photos of me, and I'm going to do that same function where I'm going to say file info, and I'm going to add one more little tag, me. So I've added that tag, and I'm going to do that same thing where I want to look at just the photos of me, and there we have the photos of me. So in this, it's kind of a tiny preview here, so I'm not sure exactly, like, I want to see this larger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to go to Workspace, and this is something that you can do throughout the different Adobe programs, is you can change your workspace. So I'm working with photos, and I want to be able to see those photos and kind of like a little bit better view than just what the standard view is. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to go to Film Strip, and it brings those photos up larger so I can see them, and I can see myself and roll through. And like, this is a good look at my personality. Oh, we've got some doubles, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is the next step of what I want to do to kind of figure out where we're going with my graduation card is I want to pick which photos I want to use. So Adobe Bridge has this little function down here on the bottom, it normally does, where you can star, and it's not working this time while I'm actually doing this. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can kind of check out. Okay, so because I had those thumbnails so small, the stars weren't appearing. I couldn't click on them. But now that I've made it a little bit larger, you can see those down here on the bottom. They just look like little dots at first, but they are actually stars. So you can say, okay, I like this photo a lot, or I don't like this photo very much at all. And then it shows it up here as well on the main photo in that film strip. So as I'm going through, I want to look at these photos and figure out which ones I want to use. Well, these two photos look a lot alike. I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to star this one lower. I'm just going to give it the 1 star because I do have the cutout of Edmund Lowe, the man the library is named after, kind of like hanging out behind my shoulder.
In a boa.
In a boa. If
Very
you haven't
important.
seen that boa, and there is a top hat, it's just off frame, but it's there. So I like this photo quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a 4. This photo, it just speaks 100% about my personality, so I'm going to say that's a 5. This photo here, that's another good personality photo that shows who I am. So I'm going to give it a 4. This one, it talks about me, but I'm making kind of a dumb face here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that's a 1. And then the rest of these photos over here are duplicates that had that same metadata. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to kind of move from Bridge into Photoshop. And the way that you go do that is you just take your file that you want to edit and you'll double click it and it'll open it up in Photoshop. And I'm going to hand it over to Nina to talk about Photoshop.
Hey, look, it's me. Hi, y'all. My name is wow, that was really country. I love that. My name is Nina Thornton. I'm the multimedia producer for the library, and I'm going to take you through a little bit of Photoshop. Like he mentioned, we are actually going to incorporate 3 photos into the final product. And like he mentioned, I like to set up my workspace specifically for the portraits. But there are a couple things that I like to do and have up immediately. Adjustments is one of those pieces that I like to pull up in my panels over here that I just have easy access to. I will go to Windows for additional options to add to my workspace. I like my history tool. And the other one that I like is got my layers. Okay, I think I'm pretty set. All right, and I will take out this stuff. Come on, close. All the stuff I don't need. So again, you can customize this workspace to suit your needs. Down here on the bottom right in Photoshop, a lot of the programs in Adobe will have these layers. And that is what's down here. This is the image that you brought in. If you can see, it has a little lock icon next to it. Let me kind of talk about destructive and non-destructive editing. So when you bring in a photo, it will automatically lock that first layer there. I like to go ahead and click and drag down to this little icon here, which creates a duplicate layer. You can do this a couple of different ways. You can right-click, duplicate, but I like to work in another layer so that I don't destroy my original image, and I can always go back to it if I funk something up, because it might be weird. So I just kind of hide that layer like it doesn't even exist, make sure it's locked. You can lock additional layers as well, but we're going to keep this one unlocked. So destructive editing, of course, destroys your photo and destroys the original in that layer. Non-destructive is going to add layers above this layer that will affect everything below, but still will not impact directly or embed directly onto that layer. So that is the difference between that destructive and non-destructive. So what we're going to do is demonstrate non-destructive with a couple of different details on this photo. It's a little bit bright from what I'm initially noticing, and it also needs a little bit of color correction, and that's where I start for portraits or images of people. I want to make sure that their skin tone is accurate, doesn't have too much blue, doesn't have too much yellow, green, purple, who knows. And then also, are my levels okay? Do I have any what we call like hot spots or high key spots? So is everything even on the face as far as light and shadows? Because we don't want those to be too prominent. So the first thing I'm going to do is do brightness, affect brightness. Over here on this bottom right panel in your layers panel, there's an adjustment tool, okay? There's also, if you noticed, I opened the adjustments layer. I did. Oh, thank you. Right over here, this is the same thing as down here. You can click and drag this into, this is usually where mine is. Click and drag this around to customize it. But down here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at brightness, contrasts, and see how it opened up that new layer. So again, that non-destructive, okay? If I double click on this layer, it's going to bring up that specific adjustment, okay? We're going to bring this brightness down a bit. Oh, there's your face. There's your face. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with color correction. So I'm going to go down here. I am going to select color balance. Boop. Again, it opens that new layer. It's already up here. So this has a little bit of blue to it. I'm going to warm it up a little bit. So take in this slider, and with basic color theory, the opposite of blue is going to be yellow. So we're going to add a little bit to get a little warmer. It doesn't have to be much. Okay, so at this point, you might notice that on these two layers, there's what we call a mask portion of it. What a mask will do and can do for you is it will allow you to only affect certain areas of your photo in order to kind of affect a change in a specific way. Let me show you what that means. You would use the brush tool. Glad that pops up. You would use the brush tool to affect this portion of the mask. You would double click. Oops. Nope, just kidding. Don't do that. Go back. Thank you. Just single click on it. That'll go through. And if you want to reveal something or hide something on that layer, you would paint it black or white respectively. This particular layer is white, so if I wanted to hide that color balance or kind of erase it, if you will, I would switch this to black. I would take my paint tool and I would be able to basically erase or mask out that color correction. Okay, so if I just wanted to affect him, I could do that. Now, to let you see that a little bit clearer, let me go ahead and do some extremes. Okay, so do you see where I started to mask out there? So we'll go back, we'll click on the mask portion, and this is what masking will do. It will allow you to fine-tune some of those details that you want to affect, okay? Now, if you decide that that is not your thing, Control-Z is your friend. Control-Z until you get what you want, okay? If that doesn't work for you, it only goes back once. Control-Alt-Z in Adobe 2018. Control-Z works beautifully in 2019. But you can go back multiple times with Control-Alt-Z or Control-Z. All right, so the next thing that we are going to do is look at the 3 tools that are going to be essential to fixing skin or any minor details in a portrait that you want to either hide or bring out. The first tool is a spot healing brush tool that can be found in the left-hand panel. Looks kind of like a Band-Aid. The next one is going to be the healing brush tool. And then the oh so lovely clone tool. Clone tool kind of looks like a stamp. All right, so the spot healing brush tool, which is the Band-Aid with the little circle on it, what that's going to do is sample areas automatically around that tool and replace it. So it will be automatic, okay? The healing brush tool, however, you have to tell it what to substitute. Let me show you the difference. There's your face again.
Oh, I did not know we were getting that close.
I
to my face.
apologize. I do. I totally apologize. Sorry about that.
I apologize.
All right, so this spot healing brush tool, what I'm going to do is make sure I am on the correct layer. So it's this background layer here. And I'm just going to click. And it's going to automatically take out and resample some of the surrounding details and then put it where you would like to place it. However, this healing brush tool, if I hit Alt, see how I get that little bullseye right there? And then click, it is going to sample this space and then allow me to replace it with some of these color values. It's not going to be gross. Yeah. Okay. Clone tool bloop, is going to kind of do the same thing, but this is really for replacing objects. So you kind of want to use this sparingly unless you do what we call frequency separation, and that's affects skin tone and it also affects color and it separates those two. But you would use this mainly for replacing of objects and then as a part of your frequency separation for skin tone and editing. So again, you would hit Alt to define a point, and then you would be able to completely replicate whatever your source is. Okay, so those are the really 3 tools. They do have specific functions. Right now, I'm going to sample out that little piece of hair. Can I erase some of your hair?
I mean, you can, but it's
racing the sun.
Need to keep what hair I have.
So anything, anything that you see that you might just want to take attention away from, or if there's a little thing in the background, let's say he had a bracelet on that he doesn't like, or a watch on that he doesn't like, or maybe you have a puppy and you have a couple of pieces of dog hair on your shirt. Not everything's going to be perfect. We're just going to do. All right. Take that out.
I always look nice.
Oh, look nice. All right. What else can we do? All right. It looks like we are ready. File. Save as. So in our efforts to move down the line and show you how these kind of work together, I'm actually going to save this out as a Photoshop file. And down the line, if they need to make a change, we can just open up that Photoshop file. So I'm going to save that as desktop. grad card 03, and we're going to make sure it says Photoshop. So File, Save As, grad card 03 to keep the same name, and save. Okay. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and minimize.
All right, so now we're going to move on to Adobe Illustrator, probably one of my favorite programs to work with. My name is William Davis. I'm another one of the communication specialists here at the library. And for Illustrator, what we're thinking for this graduation card, we'd have one Anthony's signature on it, so it looks like it was signed by him, and then also just a nice little illustration of like a graduation cap, because it's not a graduation card if you don't have a little cap, and he has not bought his yet. And so we'll draw one for him. And so just to get started, we'll go ahead and go to Create New, and it's going to give us some templates we can work with. We're not really going to use any of the templates because we're just going to adjust everything later on. So I'm going to make a square for an artboard, and an artboard is where all of your art's going to go, and it's going to be whatever you export is going to be what's on that artboard. So I'm just going to make a square one for now. It's going to be 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. And the first thing we're going to do is make that signature. And how we're going to do that is I brought my own Wacom tablet with me. One of y'all here today is going to win your own Wacom tablet, so you can go home and do this yourself if you want. And I'm going to just plug this in real quick. And I got my pen down below me here. And to get to drawing, we got our brush tool over here, paintbrush tool. If you want to use a hotkey for that, the hotkey is B on your keyboard for brush. But we're actually going to double click it really quick to bring up some settings, because depending on how this top bar here, this fidelity is set, is going to affect how your drawing looks after you've made your lines with your pen. So I'm actually going to set it to accurate, because if I set it all the way to smooth, it would take a lot of control away from me and take out any squiggles or fine lines that would be made by Anthony's signature. And it should be fine just right there at fully accurate. And of course, I'm not actually Anthony, so I'm just going to forge his signature right here. It's not going to look like anything like his real signature, but we'll just draw it real quick. And then Y, yeah, and then J, something like that. So that's
it's not that far
not
off.
not that far off.
Looks legit.
Have you been practicing Anthony's signature?
You know, not really. Not gonna lie. And I'm just gonna move that over here for now. And if we look at, that's not too bad looking, but we can actually make a more accurate pen stroke, because right now it's all one weight of that pen stroke. In real life, if you had an actual pen, it wouldn't look like that. There'd be differences in weight and thickness across the signature. And so I can actually show you how to make a pen stroke of your own. And I'm just going to make, I grabbed my circle tool, the ellipse tool over here. I just click on that, hold it, make an ellipse tool. I'm going to make a very long little oval here. And then, just like everyone else has so far, I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to add brushes. And I'm just going to dock it right over here somewhere. Brushes right here. And if I zoom in really quick, you'll see this oval I've made is not a filled in oval, it's an outline of an oval, as you can see. And I want to change that. I want to flip it. It's going to be a filled in oval. And so I can just click that, and really quick, all I have to do is press Shift and then X on my keyboard, holding down Shift and then pressing X. And that switches the outline with whatever the fill was. Right then it didn't have a fill, and so it just switched the outline with blank, and it has no outline. And over here in this brushes panel, with this selected, you can see that blue box around it. With this selected, I'm going to click this icon that looks kind of like a post-it note with the corner flipped up, and that's going to define a new brush. And I'm going to select Art Brush. Okay. And with this menu, right now we'll come back to it, but all I'm going to do under coloration is select Tints, and that will allow us to change the color of it later when we want to go back. And so now all I have to do is I can use this arrow tool here, the selection tool, select all of that, and select this brush that we just made over here, our brush 1. And you can see it looks a little weird right now, not exactly what we wanted, but that's okay, because we can fix that by double clicking on that. It brings back up that menu box we saw earlier, And if I click preview, and then I can start scaling down this width bar up here, and then we can start getting something more accurate to what we really wanted. And now it looks a bit more like an actual, I will apply a stroke after clicking OK. It looks like an actual pen wrote that. But that's not actually what we're going to use. We're going to use Anthony's actual signature. And this is going to be a method that you can use even if you don't win the tablet. So you can go home and do this yourself as well. So I'm going to go to File, New. We're just going to make a new one. Same with square art board. And I've actually scanned Anthony's signature, and I have it here on this computer. Oh, right here. I'm just going to place it right here. It's pretty small right here, but that's okay. We're going to make it a vector, and that's what is great about Illustrator is when you make a vector out of something, you can scale it and stretch it and do whatever you want with it, and it won't lose any fidelity or details. So with this selected, you can see that there's a blue box around it. I'm going to go to Window and then add as well my Pathfinder box down here. I'm going to dock that. And then over here, where is it? It popped yesterday. Oh, here we go. It's on the side today. It changed its mind. So over here, it might come up here, it might come over here, but it's image trace when you have this selected. So image trace, and it's going to give you some templates here to choose from. And I'm just going to select 3 colors for now. And that automatically made a vectorized version of his signature. So it traced it for me and made it vectors. And I can actually go in and adjust this. So after I selected that template, 3 colors, next to that, there's this box here. And it'll say open the image trace panel. And so I can go in and adjust this a bit. I'm going to open this advanced tab. And first thing I'm going to do, instead of 3, I'm going to bump this down to 2. And under advanced, you have all of these other bars for number of paths, number of corners, and noise. And depending on how you adjust these, you can get some different results. So if I went to paths high, you can see it added a lot more of the details in from when it was a more pixelated image. And so like all the jagginess of the lines of the pen or any pixelation that was in there, that got more preserved in the paths. If I go to low, it smooths all of them out, almost unnaturally so. You can see that's really weird around here. So I'm just going to go a little bit more on the high side so it looks a little bit more natural. Corners does a bit of the same thing. If you bump it all the way down, any corners that were like here and like the T and all that will be rounded out. We don't really want that, so we'll go more high corners on that. And then noise. We want a little bit more noise because that's going to bring in some more of the details from his signature. So I'm going to bring up the noise just a little bit. And so that's going to add in more of the pen stroke that I had kind of missed when I had originally traced this, or scanned it, I suppose. Okay, so that's looking okay to me. I can close this now. And we almost have something we can use. I can even scale this up now by holding the Shift key and coming here to the corner, and that preserves the original ratio of it. But you can see when I drag this off the artboard, there's a white background behind it. We don't want that white background, because when we bring it into the graduation card that we're going to make, it's going to go over a photo, or it might be going over another part of it. And so we're going to get rid of that background. And I'm going to right click, and where did it go? It should be right here. Select, edit. Well, I'm just going to tell you the hotkey then. So if you press Control-Shift-G, that will get rid of the group. It was originally a group. Control-Shift-G. I can double-click it. Oh, I've skipped a step. That's what the problem is. So back on Properties, what we have to do is click Expand. And that makes the group for us. It's now a bunch of individual components within one group. And then I can right-click and click Ungroup. And if I click off now, you can see I can drag this white background away. But there's still a lot of white little bits in between the letters. And so it'd be really tedious for me to go in and select each of those and have to, click all of them. There's a quicker way to do it. It's the magic wand tool. It just looks like a magic wand. If you want to, you can just press Y on your keyboard and select that white, and it knocks out all of them. And so I can just drag this over here. I'm going to actually press Control G to make it a group again. And then that way, on this Pathfinder window that I added earlier, there's a tab for Align. And I'm going to align it. Is there something? Show Options. And then Align to Artboard down here. And then that will allow me to just center it there. And now you can see on this artboard, it's a lot taller than it is than the actual signature. I'm going to go down here on the left to the artboard tool, Shift O on the keyboard, and I can just drag this in now, and we'll have that as our signature for later. And we'll actually, while we're here, just make that a nice OSU orange. And it's important that we have it like this. That way when we bring it into InDesign later, if Anthony were to lose his mind and transfer to another university at the last minute and want to use those colors instead, he could do that and update it just like that. So we'll save this onto our desktop for now. We'll just name that Anthony Signature Vector on the desktop. Okay, and we'll have that for Bonnie later. And I'm going to make another new file, and now we're going to draw that little graduation cap. We're just going to keep everything the same here. And I'm going to go to the left here, click on that circle, and now we have our rectangle tool. If you wanted to, you could press M on your keyboard. I guess that stands for rectangle. And I'm just going to hold Shift and make a square. And then get my selection tool up here, the black arrow. And I'm going to come to the corner, and I'm going to hold Shift and rotate it 45 degrees to get a rectangle. And just like earlier, I want the outline to be flipped. So now it's a black square. So I'm going to hit Shift X. And there's actually a white outline. I'm just going to get rid of that. So now we just have a black rectangle, and this is going to be the top of our graduation cap. And to make it give it some perspective, I'm going to go to this little tool here. It looks like two squares with an arrow pointing up. It's the scale tool. You can just press S on your keyboard for scale. And when you start clicking and dragging with that, you can see that it's going to do I can just like make it all kinds of weird diamond shapes now. But I'm just going to make it in kind of like an oblong horizontal diamond shape like that. And that will be good enough for now. I will go ahead and align that to our artboard. Align to artboard. There we go. And then after that, I'm going to make a circle with the ellipse tool. So L for ellipse, or you can just click like that. And I'm going to come to this point and hold Shift and then Alt. And that's going to make a perfect circle that comes from the center of where I've just clicked. I'm going to make it just like so. And now, since I have that circle, I'm going to come over here, and we have our pen tool, which we're only going to use a little bit, but I'm actually going to grab this anchor point tool right here. Because what I'm going to do is zoom into this point on the circle and click on it with that anchor point tool. And that removes any kind of curve that point on the circle had. And then grab my scale tool again, or S on the keyboard for scale. And I'm going to not working. Oh. So what you just saw was that I had actually still had only that point selected, and so it's trying to scale that point instead of the whole circle or shape. So I have to go back to the selection tool and click that, and then I can use my scale tool to do what I wanted. And I'm just going to kind of widen that out to make sort of like the hat part of the graduation cap. And I'll move that up a bit. Just make a little bit more adjustment. Like that. And so what I want to do is actually kind of give this a bit of an outline so it looks like not just one solid blob of a hat. So I'm going to select my diamond shape here again and go to Object, and then come down to about midway to where it says Path, and then Offset Path. And I'll click preview here. And you'll see it's made sort of a duplicate of this diamond here, just offset by a certain number of pixels. And I can set that to whatever number I want. I can set it to 100 and make a really big one. But I'll just set it to 10 for right now. Oops. And I just press enter. And in layers, over here on my right, you can see that I have 2 of them now. And what I want to do is this new one that I just made, I'm going to bring it to the top by just clicking and dragging. And I'm actually going to select it and that circle shape that I made earlier at the same time, and go to my Pathfinder tab over here on my Windows. And this gives us some really cool options that I really like in Illustrator, to where we can cut out shapes or combine shapes. And when I click this one here with the blank circle in front of a solid circle, it says minus front, it's going to knock out that bigger rectangle for my circle shape. And so now we have a more defined cap here, where we have the brim and then the actual board of the graduation cap. And so from here we can go and grab our pen tool. It's P on your keyboard for pen, and I'm just going to make a squiggly line by clicking and dragging out here. Just go like that. And as you can see, as we've seen earlier, it has a fill but no outline, and we want to flip it now. So Shift X, and now it has an outline but no fill. And I'll just click that, go to my properties, and I can bump that up to give it a thicker line. So we're going to make our tassel here, and I'm going to go back and make another rectangle. So M on my keyboard if I wanted to use my shortcuts. I'm just going to make a little rectangle here and press Shift X to flip that outline. And with this still selected, you can see here in each of these corners there's these little blue circles. And if I use my mouse to click and drag on those, it rounds the edges of my rectangle, so I can round the corners. But I really only want to round the top 2 corners. And so instead of using this selection tool, which is the black arrow, we're going to use the direct selection tool, very different, this white arrow here. I'm going to click and drag and select just these 2 top points on my rectangle, and then I can just round those 2. And I'll use my main selection tool to rotate it, and we're going to add that, and now we have a bit of a tassel on our graduation cap. And I can edit this line to make it a bit more smooth. There we go. Oop, didn't mean to click that. And now we have a nice little graduation cap. I'm going to select everything all at once and press Control G to make it a group. That way I can expand everything, go to my Align tab, align it to the center of my artboard, just like that. And I'm going to use that artboard tool again over here on the left toolbar. I'm just going to scale that inwards. That way when we bring it into our graduation card file that Bonnie is going to make here in a moment, there's not a lot of extra border around it. It's going to be easier for her to manipulate it the way she wants it. And then I'll also select everything, make this OSU orange as well. And for this one, we have to do the stroke is orange. There we go. And then I will save that as graduation cap, if I can remember how to spell it. And I'm going to just save that on the desktop for Bonnie.
That's why I called my things grad.
Oh.
Much easier to spell.
There we go. Okay. And so now Bonnie has all of the nice little illustrations that she will need for the graduation card. And I can just close this. We won't save that because that's the one that we drew by hand. And now we can start putting everything together.
All right. So my name is Bonnie Kane Wood, and I am the manager of communication services. And so I'm going to finish this off in a program called InDesign. And so Photoshop we use for editing our photos. Illustrator we use for illustrating or drawing things. InDesign is ideal for doing page layout. So I've used InDesign for a variety of projects. It's great for brochures, for magazines. I've done entire books in InDesign, but really anything that you're going to print, InDesign can work really well. And InDesign really sets itself apart from some of the other Adobe products when you're working with large bodies of text, which we're going to have just a little bit of text on it today, but it has some really great tools for manipulating text. So if you're doing something like a brochure or even a resume and you want to do a lot of text, InDesign is really the product that you want to be using. So just like with all of our other ones, when we open it up, we kind of get this panel here, and we're going to create new to get started. You can also always come up here to File, New Document. In all of the Adobe products, we like to joke that there's at least 5 different ways to do any one task. So if you use one of these products, you might have seen someone doing something in a different way. There's not a right or wrong way. There are lots of ways to get the job done in Adobe products. So I'm going to create new. And we're going to do a graduation announcement. So across the top here, I'm going to select print. And this is just going to give me some kind of options for setting up my document to print. I'm going to change my units over here to inches because who the heck knows how big a pica is. And then I want this to be a postcard, and Nina knows how big a pica is. I'm going to make it wide, so I'm just selecting my orientation over here. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to go 5.5 by 7 for my postcard. Then as we scroll down, we're going to see some more options here. If you're making a multi-page document, like a magazine or a multi-page handout, you can add your extra pages here, but you can always go back later and add extra pages. Because we're doing a postcard and my postcard is going to be one-sided, I'm just going to start with one page. I'm going to unclick facing pages. It doesn't really matter for a one-page document. Facing pages are for when you're doing something like a magazine where when it closes, the pages face each other, and so it'll make sure your pages lay out correctly. Columns, I'm not going to worry about. I'm going to do that a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and set up my margins here, and I'm going to bring them down. Because my card is fairly small, I'm just going to give myself 1/8 of an inch for the margin. And then I'm also going to come here to this option called bleed and slug. So if you're actually printing something and you want either a background color or a photo or an image to go all the way to the edge of the document, you need to set that up with what is called a bleed. So you've probably had this before where you're trying to have a color go all the way to the edge, and you run it through your printer and your printer can't print that way, right? It always leaves that little bit of white around. It's very frustrating. The way you fix that, and the way you would fix that at a professional printer, is you put on what's called a bleed. You actually make your page a little bit bigger than you want to make it, and you bleed that color or that image off the edge of the page. They print it larger and then cut it down to the size you want, and that's how you get your pictures to go all the way to the edge. So I'm going to put a solid background on the back of mine, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a bleed. And I'm just going to say 1/8 of an inch. For most printers, 1/8 of an inch is adequate for their bleed. And even some of the online services that you can use to print postcards and business cards, they'll let you upload images with a bleed on them. Slug, you're not going to have to worry about. That's for really complex printing projects. In 20 years of working with printers, I've never had to put a slug on anything. So we're just going to go ahead and hit create. And we can see here, I've got my blank page. This red guide that I see along the outside, that's showing me where my bleed goes to. So where I see white, that's actually how big my page is. And then the red line is my bleed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my background, because I want my background to just be a solid black, because we're going to do kind of a OSU color scheme. I'm just going to grab the rectangle tool here over on my toolbar. And I'm going to come over to the edge of my bleed. I'm just going to drag that over. And right now I don't see anything. And William was doing this in a different way. I'm just going to come over here to this corner where it shows me my outline is black, my fill is none, and I'm going to hit this little toggle button and it switches that. So now I've got a black background there. And I don't want my black background to go anywhere, so I'm going to lock it. So I'm just going to select it with my selection tool. I'm going to come up here to Object, Lock. Now that black box is in place, and if I click it and drag it on accident, I can't move it around. So I know that's where I want it to be. Now next, for me to lay out all of my stuff, I want to give myself a nice grid to work with so I can line things up easier. And there are lots of different ways to add these guides to your InDesign document. So one easy way is just you click and drag here from your rulers, and you can drag some guides down if you want to do it that way. But I want to be a little more precise about it. So I'm going to use an option from our layout menu up here. So we come up here to layout, and I'm going to go to create guides. So this is going to give me the ability to create either rows or columns. And I'm going to click this preview so we can see what we're doing as we go. So I'm going to say I want 3 rows because thirds are a nice, pleasing kind of dimension to have. And I'm going to move my gutter down, and the gutter is just that distance between those. So if I was making columns, you might want a little margin there in between your columns. You can use that, but I'm just using these for guides. And then I'm going to say give me 2 columns. Again, I'm going to just go ahead and pull my gutter down because I'm just using these to line things up. Now it'll also give me the option to fit my guides to my page or fit my guides to my margin. So when I click those, you can kind of see those changed just a little bit. So when I say fit my guides to the page, it's taking that entire page and cutting it into thirds. If I said from my margins, it would take just the space between the margins and cut that into thirds. So we don't see a big difference because my margins are so small. But if we were working with larger margins, it would be really noticeable. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So we have those there. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to put some of these great photos we had of Anthony on here. And there's, again, a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to start off by deciding exactly where I want my image to go, and then I'm going to put the image inside that box. So I'm just going to select this rectangle here, and I'm going to line it up to start with these guides. So now I just have that little blue box. I'm going to come over here to File and Place. And so this is going to allow me to take a file from another product and place it into my InDesign. And this is one of the great things about the Adobe products. They all work really well together. So they're very, very seamless, jumping from one to the other. So I'm going to place some of these images. Let's see if we can find them. We put them on the desktop. Let's start off with this one. This one looks pretty great. Okay. So I have that binding box for it, and the image I placed in there is much, much larger than the box that I placed. So I'm going to triple click on that, and you'll see kind of along the edge, it might be kind of hard to see on here, I've got kind of an amber colored box that shows me how big my photo actually is. And it's so big that it's actually off my workspace altogether. So I'm going to use some of my tools up here at the top to make it smaller. I've got my constraints, my proportions constraints for scaling here, and I'm just going to start going down by percentage, right? And I'm just going to bring it down, bring it down, bring it down until I start getting closer to the size that I want. There we go. Now that we're here, I can kind of see the corners of my image. So if I wanted to too, I can just grab one of these corners. I want to hold down the Shift key. If you hold down the Shift key, that makes sure that you scale in proportion and I don't pull it and make Anthony look really fat. So we're going to hold down the Shift key, and I can resize it this way too. Now, I've made it smaller than my bounding box, so I'm going to pull it out here. Okay, so we'll just leave him right there for now. Now, I don't have to have a bounding box to put an image on, so let's put a couple more on. I'm going to place, and let's grab, let's see, we had grad card, we liked that one, and let's also, I'm going to hold down my control key to select multiples. We're going to get this blue steel stair here, Anthony. And so I selected 2, so now I've got both of those here on my cursor, and I can just click anywhere to drop those on. So again, these are gigantic. Let's just grab them both, and I'm going to make them 25% that size. Oh, 25% that size, so they're small enough to deal with. Okay, so let's put this one right here, and right now the way I have it selected, you see I've got the blue box. That means I have the bounding box. So if I grab this and pull it down, I'm just resizing that bounding box. Triple click on it again to get my orange box, and I can start resizing that image inside the box. So we'll just put him right about there. And then I'm going to put this one over here. I'm going to resize my bounding box. And then I'm going to resize my image. Put him in there where, there we go. Okay, so I want these to be square, so let's go ahead and resize those now. I like how tall it is, so I'm just going to take my height there, copy, and paste it. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to take my height, copy, paste it onto my width. Now those are square. Oops. Undo.
Control Z is your friend.
Control Z is your friend. Okay, so now I've got those nice two square images. I want to give myself a little more room, so I'm going to select them both and just resize those until they fit where I want them. Now, I have changed my mind. I want to make this picture of smiling Anthony and the orange lights a little bit bigger, so I'm just going to grab the bottom of my bounding box and drag it down. And then grab my image there, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. And I can toggle my guides on and off, so sometimes it's kind of hard to see what you have going on. You can do that up from your toolbar, but the quick key for that is Control colon. So if I just Control colon, I can turn them off, and then I can turn them back on to see. All right, so now let's add a little bit of text on here. I'm going to grab my text tool, just looks like a T, and I'm going to define the box that I want to put it in right now. So I'm just going to, and that little guide pops up there to tell me I'm lining up with the edge of my image, so we're going to do that. And I'm just going to start typing. It's finally happened. Okay. So I typed something, but you can't see it. And it's because I'm typing black on a black background. So we're just going to double click to select that. And there's a couple different ways we can change our color. Again, I can come over here and select, just double click on that T. And I can come around here and pick a color. Or I can also come over here to the side to my swatches and find the color that I want there. So let's just add a little more text. Oh. That's my caps lock. Anthony is graduating.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Oh,
Anthony. May 29th, 1:30 p.m. Gallagher? Sure. Iba Arena. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of text to work with. So right now it's just in my default font, so let's change that. We're going to select these first two rows. Let's pick a different font. So you can actually put your character, your font tools in different areas depending on where you like to have them. So lots of times I will kind of dock mine over here on the side because they're easier to get to, but you're always going to find your text tools up here at the top. So if you're manipulating text, you're going to have your text tools up here. So this A gives me my font options. So I'm going to click that drop down, and do we have lobster on this? No, of course not. Joker Man, there we go.
I'm a big fan of Comic Sans.
So change the font, make it big. I can't, not even for a joke. Here we go. Arial rounded, that's fine. And I'm gonna make this top one, we're gonna bring it up and make it even bigger. And then I want both these first two lines to be centered. So I'm going to grab that paragraph tool right underneath. That toggles over and gives me some more text options, and we'll just center it. Now, there's a couple different ways I could move this second chunk of text down. One is I could add some paragraph spacing, and paragraph spacing is just what it sounds like. It adds space between your paragraphs. So if I select this line here, and I'm here on my paragraph tab, I can start increasing the space underneath that paragraph, and that bumps those down. I can also just pull those out into a different text box. So if I come over here and grab my selection tool, you can see I've got my whole text box here. I'm going to grab the bottom of this, just like I cropped those photos, and I'm going to crop that text box, and I'm just going to pull it up. Now, I can tell there's more words in this text box because I get this little red plus sign on the side. I'm going to click that little red plus sign, and now that text is loaded here in my cursor, and I can drop it somewhere else. So I'm just going to pull it over here. And I'm going to crop that over, grab it again. So I have Gallagher Iba in a different one. I'm just going to pull them over here like that. And I'm going to make those a little bit bigger. There we go. And I want these to line up next to each other, so I'm just going to grab my May 11th date, change the justification on that, and then I'm going to put a little bar between them. So I'm going to grab my line tool. I'm just going to eyeball it for now, and I'm going to hold the shift key down while I do this, and that makes sure that my line is perfectly straight up and down, that it doesn't get just a little bit jaggedy. I got my line tool over here, and I can come up and I can make my line a little bit thicker, come over here, make my line white. All right. So William used this tool a little bit in Illustrator, but you can also use this tool in InDesign, and that's the Align tool. So I want these to line up. I want them to all be even with each other. So I'm going to use my Shift key to select all three of these, and I'm going to come up here to Align Vertical Centers, and then they align. And then I'm going to group these all together too, because I want to keep those together. So just like William did, I'm going to do Control G to group those, and now I can grab them all in one chunk. So I'm going to move that down to the bottom. So William made us this great graduation cap. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And it's an AI file right now, but because I'm working in Adobe, they're all going to work together. So I'm just going to grab that graduation cap, and just like I did with my images, I'm going to place it in there. Again, it's really large, so we're going to just start scaling it down. And now you'll notice, you might notice it on this larger image, but you can definitely see it here. It's kind of jaggedy, right? It doesn't look as nice as what it looked like when we were in Illustrator. The reason we're seeing it that way is because it's a preview. So all of the Adobe products, they're extremely powerful, which means they're using a lot of your computer's power to do this. It's running faster by giving me a kind of a low resolution preview of that. But if you want to see what it's really going to look like, you can just right click on it, come down to Display Performance. So you can see here, it's giving me typical display. You can also go to fast display. So if you're working with a really large file with lots and lots of images, you can go to fast display. Your images will be jaggedy, but your program will run faster. But I want to see what it looks like. So I'm going to click high quality display, and it's going to take a second, and then you see it kind of sharpen up. I can do the same thing with this photo over here. Right click, display performance, high quality, sharpens up just a little bit. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller there. I'm going to line it up. I want to give just like a jaunty angle to this cap. So I'm just going to kind of hover here on the corner until my cursor turns into a little curve. And I'm just going to tilt it like that a little bit. Jaunty angle.
Very jaunty.
Okay, let's add his signature. So I'm, again, just coming down to File, Place, grabbing that Anthony's.
Nope.
Nope, not that one.
Nope, not that one.
Oh, wrong one. Okay,
There's the one next to it.
file, place. Oh, because we're looking for our vectorized one. So I'm going to grab this one, double click, placing it on there. Again, super gigantic, so I'm just going to bring the size down.
Are you going to add a jaunty angle to that one?
I am indeed. Oh. Select. Bring it down, 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 bring it down. So I'm going to put it over here in the corner on Anthony's black jacket. Again, I love a good jaunty angle. All right, there we go. Now, we also are seeing these blue boxes around all of our pieces that's showing us our bounding boxes. Sometimes it's easier to design when you see those. Sometimes they kind of get in the way. So since I'm almost done, I want to see what it looks like without those. So I'm going to come over here to View, Extras, and I'm going to hide my frame edges. Those go away. Then I'm going to Control, get rid of my guides. So here's my graduation announcement. I can come in and kind of zhuzh just a little bit, bring some of my stuff here. All right, we're going to say we're good. Now, right now, this is saved as an InDesign file. Not everyone can open an InDesign file. So if I'm going to send this to my printer, I'm going to want to export this. So again, I'm going to come over here to File, and we're going to come down to Export. So this allows me to turn my InDesign document into a different file type. So if I was going to send this to like a press somewhere and get 300 of these printed, if I was going to send it to Staples or something and have them do it, they're going to probably want, lots of times they'll call it a camera ready file. That's fancy words for a PDF. So I'm going to tell it to be a PDF. And right now you can see here are all of our different options. We can do an interactive PDF. So if it has links and stuff in it, you can keep those with an interactive, but we're just doing a print PDF. So I'm going to hit Save, and we're not done yet because it gives me yet more options. The high quality print is a great preset to start with. If you want to print this, it's going to make sure the resolution of all of your photos stay really high. And then we're going to go through and kind of look at some of these other options. The most important one, because I put a bleed on this, is we want to come down here to marks and bleeds. I'm going to select this and say I want all of my printer marks, and I'm also going to select and say use document bleed settings. Then I'm going to click export. It's going to do its thing. And in just a second, it's going to pop open the PDF that will be a preview of what it's going to look like, the file that I'm going to send to the actual printer. Now, we can also export in a variety of different ways. So maybe I want to turn this into an e-invitation. I could come in here and I could export it as a PNG. And again, it's going to give me some of those options, the resolution that I want to pick, the color space that I want to pick, how high of a quality do I want it to be, and I can export that. So from that same InDesign file, I can export in a variety of different formats. All right. I think Taryn is going to come and draw for some prizes, and then we have a hands-on portion. So if y'all have some more in-depth questions about what you can do in these different kinds of softwares, we're gonna hash those out in a minute.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. If you want to know more about the programs or equipment available here in the library, I really encourage you to check out the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios. It's downstairs in room 105, or you can check out one of our logins for LinkedIn Learning, which offers thousands of online courses. Our next Tech Tuesday at 2, HTML, will be on March 5th, and we hope you all can join us. We'll be giving away a Chromebook, so be here for a chance to win. I also want to mention the Library Creativity Award, which we are now taking applications for. All OSU students have a chance to showcase their creativity in a number of categories, and you can win up to $1,000. You can visit our website or ask anyone here, and we would love to tell you more. but the application deadline is April 8th. If you have suggestions for future Tech Tuesday at 2 topics, please send them to us on Twitter using the hashtag LibTech2s. Right now, we're going to say goodbye to our live stream audience. Before we draw for prizes, thank you to our best friends at O State TV for hosting today's live stream, and goodbye to everyone who was online with us today.